Paris, a city where you can walk for hours and still find something you weren't expecting. Today, we are starting in one of the most famous places in the French capital, Place de la Concorde. From here, we are going to walk through the Tuileries Garden, one of the most beautiful gardens in Paris, before continuing toward the Louvre, and eventually, one of the most elegant neighborhoods in the city, Place Vendôme. But there's something you probably wouldn't expect to find on this walk. Something completely unexpected. Because somewhere inside the peaceful gardens of central Paris, there's a circus. Yes, a circus. And today, we are going to find it. So let's start walking. Let the sounds of Paris play naturally. We are beginning here, at Place de la Concorde, and this is a fascinating place to start a walk through Paris, because from this single point, you can almost see the different personalities of the city. Behind us, the Champs-Élysées stretches toward the Arc de Triomphe. Ahead, the Tuileries Garden leads us toward the Louvre, and somewhere beyond, the streets become quieter, more elegant, more mysterious. But Place de la Concorde itself has a story, a very dramatic one. This beautiful square was once one of the most important stages of the French Revolution. Imagine standing here centuries ago and seeing Paris in a completely different era. The square witnessed some of the darkest and most dramatic moments in French history. Today, it feels completely different. Tourists are taking photographs. People are crossing the square. Cars move around us. And Paris continues its daily life. It's strange when you think about it. A place that once witnessed revolution is now surrounded by visitors taking holiday photos. And perhaps that's one of the most fascinating things about Paris. History doesn't disappear. It simply becomes part of everyday life. And now, we are heading toward the Tuileries Garden. This is where the atmosphere begins to change. The noise of the city starts to fade. The streets open up. And suddenly, you're surrounded by trees, paths, statues, and people simply enjoying the afternoon. The Tuileries Garden is one of those places where Paris feels completely different. You can walk through the city, surrounded by traffic and buildings, and then, just a few steps later, you find yourself in a garden. It's almost like Paris has hidden a secret inside itself. And this is where I think the best walking tours become interesting, because you don't just move from one famous landmark to another. You experience the transitions, the moment when one part of the city slowly becomes another. But now, something is changing, and this is the moment when our walk takes an unexpected turn, because somewhere inside this peaceful Parisian garden, something doesn't quite fit. At first, you might think you've misunderstood what you're seeing. A garden, a historic monument, a peaceful afternoon, and then a circus, a real circus, right here, in the middle of Paris. And suddenly, the story changes, because this is no longer just a walk through a historic garden. We've discovered something completely unexpected. And honestly, this is exactly why I love walking through cities. You can plan everything. You can make an itinerary. You can visit all the famous landmarks. But sometimes, the best memories are the things you never plan to see. A circus, in the Tuileries Garden, in Paris. You couldn't really ask for a more unexpected surprise. Think about the contrast. Outside, one of the most historic cities in Europe. Around us, architecture, museums, palaces, centuries of history. And here, a circus, color, movement, entertainment, and a completely different energy. It's almost as if two different worlds have collided. The Paris of history and the Paris of imagination. The Paris of kings and revolutions, and the Paris of children and laughter. And perhaps that's what makes the city so special. Paris doesn't always behave the way you expect. You can come here searching for art and find history. You can search for history and find a cafe. And you can walk through one of the most elegant gardens in the world and suddenly find yourself standing next to a circus. Look around. There are tourists, locals, families, couples, people sitting quietly, and people walking with nowhere in particular to be. This is one of the beautiful things about the Tuileries. Everyone seems to use the garden differently. For tourists, it's a place to discover. For locals, it can simply be a place to relax. And for someone like us, it's a place to walk, to observe, to slow down, and perhaps to wonder what stories are hidden behind all these people. The person sitting alone, the couple taking photographs, the family enjoying the afternoon. Everyone has somewhere they came from, and somewhere they're going. And for a few minutes, all of their stories cross here, in the middle of Paris. But our journey continues, and now we are heading toward one of the most famous museums on Earth, the Louvre. It's difficult to imagine another place with such a concentration of history, art, power, and stories. And yet, before we reach it, we are still walking, and I think that's important, because sometimes the journey toward a famous place is just as interesting as the destination itself. The buildings slowly change, the atmosphere changes, the crowds change, and suddenly, you realize you're getting closer. The Louvre isn't just a museum, it's a symbol, a place that has become part of the identity of Paris itself. And when you finally see it, even if you've seen it 100 times in photographs, there's still something different about seeing it in person. Here's something interesting about Paris. The city itself has a surprisingly small population compared with the enormous number of people who experience it every year. Inside the official city limits, Paris is home to roughly 2 million residents, but the wider metropolitan area is home to many millions more. And then there are the visitors. Every year, travelers from around the world arrive in Paris. They come to see the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre,
Notre Dame,
the Champs-Élysées, and places exactly like the ones we are walking through today. That's why you can walk through Paris and hear so many different languages. French, English, Spanish, Italian, Arabic, Chinese, and many more. For a few moments, all these different cultures meet in the same streets, and that's one of the things that makes Paris feel truly international. When people hear the word Louvre, most immediately think of one painting, the Mona Lisa. But the Louvre is much more than that. It is one of the largest and most famous museums in the world. Its collection contains works spanning thousands of years, from ancient civilizations to European masterpieces. But here's something many visitors don't realize. The Louvre wasn't originally built as a museum. Its history goes much further back. It was connected to the defense of Paris, then became a royal residence, and eventually transformed into the museum we know today. So when you walk toward the Louvre, you're not simply walking toward a museum. You're walking toward a building that has changed its purpose, again, and again, and again. And perhaps that's why the Louvre feels so enormous. You're looking at centuries of history, literally built into the architecture. Think about how many people have stood here. Artists, kings, revolutionaries, travelers, and millions of ordinary people, just like us. The Louvre has seen Paris change. It has seen centuries pass. And today, it continues to welcome people from every corner of the planet. Look around. Listen to the languages. Watch the people. Everyone has come here for a different reason. Some are searching for art, some for history, some for the perfect photograph, and some simply want to say, I was here. But perhaps the most interesting thing about places like the Louvre is that no photograph can completely capture the experience of being there. You have to walk. You have to look up. You have to stand still. And sometimes, you simply have to let the city speak for itself. And now, we are leaving the Louvre behind, but we are not leaving Paris behind, because there is another side of the city waiting for us, a side that feels more elegant, more luxurious, and perhaps a little more mysterious. We are heading toward Place Vendôme, and the journey there is part of the story. This is the kind of walk where you begin to notice the details, the architecture, the doors, the windows, the cafes, the people passing by. Paris doesn't always need to show you something spectacular. Sometimes, it's the smallest details that make the biggest impression. And now, we are approaching the final part of our walk. The cafes, the streets, the people sitting outside. This is perhaps the Paris that many people imagine before they ever arrive. A table outside, a drink, a conversation, people watching the world go by. And maybe, that's the secret. Paris is not just about the places you visit. It's about the time you spend between them, the walk, the pause, the unexpected discovery, the moment when you sit down and realize you don't actually need to go anywhere. Have you ever noticed something about Paris? Many of the buildings seem to belong together. The same pale stone, similar balconies, similar windows, similar heights. This isn't an accident. Much of modern Paris was shaped by a huge urban transformation during the 19th century. Wide avenues were created, buildings were redesigned, and entire parts of the city were transformed. The result is the Paris we recognize today. The elegant boulevards, the long perspectives, the grand avenues, and the architecture that has become one of the city's trademarks. It's one reason Paris looks so different from many other major cities. The city has a visual identity, and even when you're walking through a completely ordinary street, you can often tell immediately you're in Paris. And here's a question for you. How many times do you think the Eiffel Tower could fit inside the city of Paris? The answer: well, it depends on exactly how you measure it. But the interesting thing isn't the answer. It's the idea that we often think we know a city because we've seen its most famous landmarks. But a city is much bigger than its postcard. Paris is made up of thousands of streets, hundreds of neighborhoods, millions of individual stories, and every visitor experiences a different version of the city. So, what is your Paris? Is it the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, the cafes, the gardens, or perhaps a completely ordinary street you discovered by accident? Let me know in the comments. And finally, we arrive at Place Vendôme. And what a journey this has been. We started at Place de la Concorde, a place marked by revolution and history. We walked through the peaceful Tuileries Garden and unexpectedly discovered a circus. We continued toward the Louvre, one of the greatest museums in the world. And finally, we arrived here, at Place Vendôme. And perhaps that's the real magic of walking through Paris. You never know exactly what you're going to find. You can begin your journey looking for history and discover something completely unexpected. A circus, a garden, a café, a conversation, a moment. And that's why, if you ever come to Paris, don't just follow the map. Leave a little room for surprises, because sometimes the best story of your trip is the one you never planned. And today, that story began at Place de la Concorde, and somewhere in the heart of Paris, we found a circus. Before we finish this walk, here's something worth remembering. Cities are like living history books. You don't have to open a book to learn about Paris. Sometimes, you just have to walk. The buildings tell you about architecture. The monuments tell you about power. The museums tell you about art. The streets tell you about ordinary people. And the cafes tell you how people choose to spend their time. Everywhere we have walked today, something happened before us, and something will happen after us. The tourists we saw will eventually go home. The cafes will close for the night. The streets will become quieter. And tomorrow, Paris will wake up again. New visitors will arrive. New photographs will be taken. New stories will begin. And somewhere, someone will take the same walk we took today and discover something completely different. Because that's the secret of traveling. You don't just collect places. You collect perspectives. And sometimes, a simple walk through Paris can teach you more than you expected.
D'abord, on va passer par le Louvre, on va remonter comme ça, et après on va redescendre.
Thank you for walking with me. Until the next journey, keep exploring, keep walking, and remember, the best discoveries are often the ones you never expected.